So our agenda for today, we will review our nutrition and fueling checklist for the weeks before your race, the day before and morning of your race, very, very important, which I will highlight now and say it multiple times. We should have that your exact plan on the day of what you're going to do the day before and the morning of, weeks, if not months in advance. I want that. It's one less thing to worry about. And it's so important. We want to make sure that you have tested it, tried it, you know how it is under intense circumstances. So if you take one thing away from today, it's that you get that day before and race morning of nutrition meals really dialed in. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So timeline, when you're looking at your race, we like to start a minimum of 12 weeks out. And that is when you want to be logging in and taking down your sweat tests and carbohydrate tests. Sweat tests for the purpose of not only finding out electrolyte and fluid needs, but also having that under different circumstances and as your fitness changes throughout the year. So the race conditions, obviously, some of us get to train in them. I mean, it's still early season, but it might be significantly warmer or significantly cooler when you're doing your race. So having 12 weeks of multiple sweat tests not only allows us to evolve your sweat and hydration plan as the year progresses, but it also gives you different opportunities to understand and learn what your body needs in different situations, in different climates, and how you're feeling at different times. I know what I'm hydrating with in March is very different than what I'm hydrating with in July. Also, the kind of training that I'm doing in March is very different than the race-specific training that I would be doing later in the season. So when you're looking at your sweat tests, we are logging the fluids that you're consuming, how much, how often, and then the electrolytes that you're putting in there. Hopefully you all have an electrolyte that you love and are using. I like SOS Hydration is my favorite. It's a game changer for me. When selecting an electrolyte supplement, you want to make sure that it is not laden with sugar. You really only need 2 to 3 grams per serving to help get that sodium across the blood barrier and into your cells. If you have some of those kind of more hypertonic solutions where they're higher in sugar, so some of the Gatorades or I know Tailwind, I think has, and even some of the liquid fueling supplements that say they kind of do both, they give you calories and hydration, you really have to be careful because that gets into your stomach and into your gut and ends up causing more GI distress than it does actually hydrating you. Now, carbohydrate test is the other one you want to work on. And that is really learning the few types of fueling that your body does well with, what you like, and what is going to work on race day. So when we're doing a carbohydrate test, we are looking for the foods that you are going to consume, how frequently you're going to consume them, and then how your performance either changes, gets better, gets worse over the course of that training session. For athletes, we are looking for female athletes. You want anywhere from, at a minimum, 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour up to 100, 110. For men, you're looking at 90 to 120. So if right now, you're like many athletes are, you've been training all winter, really doing more of that zone 2 training, your base level carbohydrate consumption might be significantly lower. You might mistakenly think you need less. So right now you might be sitting at maybe 30 or 40 grams of carbohydrate an hour. By doing these carbohydrate tests 12 weeks out, you're giving yourself the opportunity to train your gut to be better at digesting those carbohydrates as the race goes on and at different intensities. So if your goal is to get up to 90 or 100 grams of carbohydrates an hour, you can't just do that, oh, my next session, I'll just all of a sudden eat 3 bars instead of the half of a bar I was consuming before. So having those 12 weeks, it will help slowly add in carbohydrates. You're building and training your gut to get to that point. You also want to learn what foods and carbohydrate sources work best for you. Some people are bars. I happen to like those. As much chewing as possible on the bike, because I know once I get to the run, I'm not going to be chewing anything. It's also a more kind of sustainable, longer duration fueling if you have a bar or something that has fat in it, as opposed to, carbohydrate beverage or gels. The duration of your race, you have to look at, do I want to actually consume, 12 gels over the course of my Ironman bike and then even more on my run? Or would I like to incorporate some real food while I can kind of chew and digest on the bike as much? And then the other thing is timing. Everybody's different. So by doing a carbohydrate test and repeating this over and over again, you will learn, does your body like to fuel itself every 15-minute intervals? Is it 20-minute, 30-minute? I know some athletes prefer, just because they don't want to be messing around and trying to handle food whilst riding, they will do a larger carbohydrate feed at a 30-minute interval, which works for some. But if that's just not for you, then you have to know, okay, it's 15 minutes, but it's smaller. So for example, I like to take a piggy bar, divide it up into 4 quarters, and I have 1 quarter every 15 minutes or so, or dividing it in half, depending if it's kind of a lower intensity, longer duration. So taking the time to do those is really essential. And especially with the app, being able to log those sweat tests and have a record of what's working and what doesn't work. And sometimes, so the goal, whilst it doesn't sound pleasing, is to not only see how much, but to see how far you can push that forward. So I've had many sessions, my athletes have had sessions where if we're working to increase that carbohydrate consumption and we're saying, okay, today we're going to really push it, we're going to work on 120 grams of carbohydrates, it might be uncomfortable. And then we know, okay, we're not there yet. So you have to reach some of those uncomfortable sessions to know how far you can go. And if we can get you in training to consuming, for females, 100 grams of carbohydrates an hour, then we know on race day, if we sit at 85 or 90, that's comfortable, it works, there will be no GI distress, like we can just dial that back a bit. So we're always kind of trying to push that limit forward to really maximize the amount of carbohydrates and maximize that performance benefit.
Yeah, right. And out of curiosity, could we just see a raise of hands, either digitally or real, like who has been doing sweat tests and carb tests?
Yeah.
Okay, Kathleen Seeley, great. Ada, great. That's great to hear. So a lot of people are. Could you just type in the chat, or just be curious to see what everybody's current grams per hour is?
And what hydration products or carb fueling products you guys are using are like. I'm always curious to see. All right, so while you're entering those in, time-wise, I want to make sure that we get through everything. So when we're looking at about 6 weeks out, so we've spent a good amount of time learning, trying different things. This is where we start doing kind of the planning and implementing of our race nutrition. So you want to have those sessions that are, it's not your 6-hour low intensity ride. It's your possibly 4-hour higher intensity race pace session with that run off the bike at race pace. It's very important because our bodies, as I'm sure you know, our bodies handle food and especially carbohydrates differently when we are in zone 2 and when we are in zone 4. And we need these opportunities in race-like settings to actually understand and see what's going to work for our body and what's going to feel good. This is also the time that you want to practice your race nutrition setup. I'm sure you guys have done it. I did it at Coeur d'Alene. No, I forget which one. Earlier on in my triathlon career, and I convinced myself that, because I'd always just done bottles. I like grabbing bottles. I like separating them. I have this great plan. And I saw in the expo that they had the like Aero bottle, you know, that sits between your handlebars and has the straw coming up, and like, wow, everybody else has that, I need it. And but it you know, required the setup, which my bike, it just didn't really work very well. And then I had to combine bottles because it was a different, it held more than each bottle. It was a nightmare. It was just ridiculous. And I didn't enjoy drinking out of it. I hadn't practiced it. So point there is practicing that race nutrition, this actual physical setup, just like you practice your transitions, again, if you're new, and you know where you like your shoes and how you like your helmet and the best way to attach your race belt. Same thing here. You really want to know, do I like grabbing a bottle from the back? Do I like it in front? Do I like the hydration bottle and the straw? And do I know, like if a bento box, or, I mean, I kept most of all of my fueling products in a back pocket or in my sports bra. What is going to work for you? Where are you going to put those things? And then you also, now is the time, because we are going to be loading, again, it's a loaded term, carbohydrate loading the day prior and the morning of. So these are those times when your session, if you have a Friday, Saturday, if Saturday is your race intensity brick session, Friday is when we're going to be consuming more carbohydrates so that those muscle glycogen stores are replenished. It's that 24 hours before. And if you've never loaded carbohydrates, you might think, oh, I feel a little full or bloated, or I know on race day that like desire to feel kind of lean and muscles really, what's the word? Kind of like elastic, just very ready to go. If you haven't carbohydrate loaded before, it's a potentially different feeling. So we want to find out what works. This is the time to practice that. And then also, cannot highlight this enough, ordering the products that you are going to have on the day of the race and setting them aside. I've made that mistake before of getting them and then using them, and then like trying to overnight ship an order from SOS or from the feed, or, getting to the race like, so knowing exactly what you need and then putting it aside next to the bag that you're taking. So it's all there, no questions. And I also believe that this helps avoid any of that race expo random purchasing that we all do when we get there and think, oh, I've never tried nitrates before. This beetroot supplement sounds like a good idea, which there are benefits. But if you've never done it before, it can cause some GI distress. So if you already have your products all bought and set aside and you're using them, it helps prevent any of that last minute fanatic kind of, I'll just try it. I bet it'll add that performance benefit I was looking for. Right. Finally, 2 weeks out, this is when we're looking at heat protocol. So if you know your race, like Coeur d'Alene last year, is going to be insanely hot and crazy, this is when we want to use the spa or sauna heat protocol that we have laid out. The idea of adapting your body and muscles to the heat. It's, standard. We have an article about it. We can talk about it. But that's where, if your race is going to be significantly hot, you want to make sure that you're starting that process. Again, your calendar is going to be your best friend. I know a lot of times because all of our training is loaded, we don't ever sit down and look kind of months ahead and really map this stuff out. But it's just as important to map out and plan out your fueling and hydration as it is your training cycles. Same thing with fueling.
Any questions? We'll just take a pause. Ada, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The heat protocol, I'd never tried it in a hot tub, and I tried it. I'm doing Oceanside, which isn't really going to be that hot.
Yeah.
So that is not needed, but I'm doing Ironman Texas 3 weeks after. So I figured I would just kind of try it and see how I would do with it. And and in there it says, minimum 30 minutes. So then, and get it up to 40 minutes and so. And first 15 minutes, I thought, this is a piece of cake. I'm going to be A-okay in here,
Yeah.
sitting. Boy, oh boy, was that tough. And honestly, the last 5 minutes was mental, to get to 30 minutes. And I was quite surprised on the after feeling. So I didn't, getting out of that, going into a shower, and not drinking before that, and starting to drink almost an hour after. I couldn't stop sweating. It took my system a long time. So when I do it, so I thought, okay, I gave that a try. So now I know what to expect when I'm 12 days out of Texas to do it. Will that feeling get better as the days go on? The 10 days of every day being in the hot tub for 30 to 40 minutes. What is the sign I'm looking for that I am adapting? Is it that afterwards, the heat, the intense feeling and sweating?
Great questions. So two kind of key markers that you want to be looking for. One is the mental fatigue that comes along with that. So you kind of said at that 15-minute mark is where it started to become challenging. And then the last 5 minutes was the hard component piece. Ideally, that time gets greater and greater. And by the end of the protocol, that 30 minutes feels very doable. And the reason that I say it's a mental piece is because heat adaptation can be different for every athlete. And so the markers look significantly different. But one of the big benefits of becoming heat adapted is that on race day, mentally, your body doesn't shut down, and you can stay in that headspace where you know that you're still cognizant, you still have your reflexes, you still are knowing to hydrate regularly, because those are, as we start to get dehydrated and then have a heat stroke even, our mental fatigue is what kicks in, and that's when we stop drinking. We think, I'm not thirsty, because you go through those phases where you're thirsty and then all of a sudden you're not. And that's when athletes will stop consuming, which is the dangerous component of it. So key marker number one is mentally how you adapt over those 2 weeks. And then the physical aspect of that is that your body becomes more efficient at regulating heat. And therefore you start releasing that heat and sweating less, especially after you get out. So that thirst, your body will be better at maintaining hydration over the course of those 2 weeks. And then on race day, being able to still dispense or disperse that heat whilst keeping your muscles working at a higher intensity. So mentally and then physically sweating less after, being more efficient at cooling your body over those 2 weeks.
If I could just chime in, just because I've gone through it as well and had a similar experience, is that I don't underestimate the fatigue that it brings following, not just the rest of that day, but the next day. And that's why I think the protocol is great to make sure you do, but don't take it right to race day. So, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. It's 100%, which on a smaller scale is why we really stress the importance of staying hydrated every day, because that dehydration and fatigue builds. And so if we're 1 day behind on our hydration, 24 hours and then 48 hours, and it is the cumulative effect of dehydration will really take not only on your performance, but your recovery, which then is just a snowball effect of your training and racing. So very good point about the fatigue 24 hours afterwards.
So important that we start on the 12-day and
Yes.
stop on the 2 days prior.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's no cramming. There's no cramming in hydration sweat protocol. You want to do it. You need those 2 days to fully recover and help your body hydrate again. All right. So pre-race nutrition. This is what we are looking at the day before and the morning of. Adequate carb loading. For females, we are looking at around 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. Men, we are looking at about 6 to 7. So, which is significantly different and more than a lot of people are consuming, which is why you want to practice in those 6 weeks out, seeing what it feels like and learning what foods, which depending on your carbohydrate consumption, it could be significantly different. It also could just be a typical green day for you. And I've seen a lot with athletes, they're like, oh, I just have to have more carbohydrates. So what they'll do is have a meal that they think is high in carbohydrates, as opposed to adding carbohydrates to each meal. So the difference there is fueling yourself throughout the day with higher carbohydrate meals and not just a big bowl of rice or pasta or something with your dinner the night before. So taking those 24 hours and then knowing what types of carbohydrates are really not only beneficial, but also feel good and you're able to digest.
Yeah.
If you,
And sorry, just to quickly add in, I know Les asked if that was per pound or kilogram. It is per kilogram. And the good news is we actually do this for you in the app. And so leading up to a race, it's already built into our recommendations. We use the right factors based on your gender and other details we know about you. So kind of take out the guesswork. And then you'll notice leading up to big race, or not big race, but long training days, typically on a Saturday, you might have a 3 or 4 hour ride. And if it's a higher intensity sort of race pace like session, you'll notice that your day before is green. And that's because we are carb loading you and starting to get you used to that. And that way, come race day, it's, second nature. And so just want to make sure we highlighted that so you don't get worried and think about all the calculations you have to do on yourself. This is just to inform you and help you understand what's happening.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. Next component is reducing your fiber intake. Now, you will not hear me say this very often because I love veggies and greens and oats. However, the one day before or it's potentially 2 days, depending on your digestive system, is the time when you almost get a free pass from loading up on really fibrous fruits and veggies and grains. The reason there is because that just can mess with our digestion. And it's not the time, out of all the things that we have to be worrying about, being in the bathroom is not one of them. So enjoy that day before. You have plenty of time afterwards. And the following week is a great time to load up on all of those greens and veggies and that have minerals and antioxidants to help with recovery. But the day before, reducing fiber intake is ideal. So if you're used to consuming oats, say for breakfast, maybe choosing a bagel or toast, or making protein pancakes or something like that, that's a little less fiber rich. If you're, daily, if your lunch salad is that, it could be a great day to have. If you're traveling to a race, could be your Subway sandwich. So still getting in those carbohydrates, but again, adapting your diet. And in the app, we have plenty of options in the recipe section for you to choose from. And then
and we'll also share reminders as well, like to minimize fibers. And you'll notice most of the recommendations are have 2/5 of leafy greens. But when it does come to day before race or day before sort of long sessions, we'll insert those reminders. So please definitely keep an eye out for that. There's a question from Trish. Any hints for us who get bloating with low fiber the day before race?
Digestive enzymes. I like to, but again, that's something you definitely want to incorporate or try beforehand. I have a very sensitive stomach, and if I don't have like kind of fiber in my same meals, especially for breakfast, it kind of messes with my daily digestion, if you will. So digestive enzymes can help. Also, kind of knowing like if you divide it into smaller meals, that can help also. So instead of kind of your 3 main meals on the day before, if you have maybe 4 or 5 smaller meals, it's a little easier on your body to digest. And there are plenty of options for digestive enzymes. One company, Digest Gold, is one that I've used, but just look for either the Informed Sport or NSF certified or the MFP manufacturing label that shows that it's been tested. So you're not just randomly choosing something off Amazon. Good question. Great question. And hydration will help with that also. Staying regular. Sometimes the day before the race, we're doing other things and not consuming the same amount of water that we usually do. So having a water bottle on you at all times can really help. All right, our pre-race nutrition timeline. So your pre-race dinner 2 to 3 hours before bed. I think this is a really important reminder. You should be, again, whether we sleep or not because of our pre-race anxiety is another story, but in theory, we should be getting to bed very early, which means if you're trying to be in bed by, 7:30, 8 o'clock, that meal 5:30-ish, 5:30 to 6 p.m. is earlier than most of us are used to eating. So really adding, like I set it in my calendar. So it's like an alert. It's like, this is when I'm eating. This is what, so that I have that time to digest before bed. Typical green meal, plain pasta or white rice with kind of a tomato-based sauce, plain chicken or plant protein, tofu is an easy one. White bread, water, electrolytes. Again, minimizing that fiber and veggie. I tend to like, chicken, either chicken thighs or salmon is kind of an easy one. And then I'll do the white rice. I'll put a little, either miso, like have some miso soup or put some soy sauce on there. So you're getting a little higher bit of sodium. And then obviously hydration. It's very easy. I've heard, if you're traveling to races, like what to choose. And that's where if you have an Airbnb or a hotel that you can kind of make your own food, that's always nice. But again, going to a sushi restaurant, that's where I'll get salmon, rice, miso soup, something like that. Not the time for big burger. And again, hopefully you will have practiced this pre-race dinner several times so you know what works, and looking ahead at the hotel you're staying at and seeing what restaurants or supermarkets are around there. I like to always look, is there a Whole Foods, because I know they have the salad bar options where I can kind of pick and choose and make a meal that I know that I like and that digests well. And it's very easy to practice that beforehand also. Your race day breakfast, 1.5 to 2 hours before. We're all up anyway, getting our, putting our race numbers on, getting our, head in the right space. Example of a green meal would be overnight oats plus 40 grams of a protein powder mixed in with blueberries. You could do toast with almond butter or peanut butter and jam with some hard-boiled eggs. And these things, again, if you're staying in a hotel, grocery stores now sell already done hard-boiled eggs. So it's easy. You can put those in your mini fridge. I did a video once on how to hard-boil an egg in a coffee pot. The little ones that they provide, it's possible. You can, most have some kind of microwave in them where you can do your oats in the morning, and they have the kettle to boil water, or the crock pot to boil water, coffee pot to boil water. So again, planning ahead of time is key. Bringing your protein powder with you to stir in. I like to, when I arrive at a race, I always go to the grocery store and stock up if it wasn't, within driving distance of your house. Again, this is something we've practiced multiple times. And And then your pre-swim snack. So 15 to 20 minutes prior to the start of the race. This is where you have a gel and some electrolytes. A banana is another great option depending on the intensity of your swim and what you're used to. I like to have a banana before a lot of my swims. I know that sits well. I've done it in training. It's very easy to carry with me. So having known what works for your body with swimming and what feels good is also really important.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Just a quick thing to highlight. So for the race day breakfast, one thing that was a revelation to me is like, while we're minimizing fiber intake the day before, it is okay to have a little bit of fiber. Is that right, Elizabeth, on the morning of?
Yep, absolutely. Not a green smoothie with spinach and whatever. Like, fiber's good, but we're not trying to do like, it's not the time to, I don't know, have 2 servings of greens in your smoothie. But a smoothie can work. Make sure you include those oats in there, your protein powder, some banana, almond butter, etc. All right, so things to consider before you're racing and training. Everyday supplements. What are you taking and how do those fit into your race plan and or travel plans? Are you taking vitamin D, iron? The few weeks prior to your race is not the time to start or stop something. We recommend that all of our athletes do blood work. So hopefully you have had labs done and you know areas that you're deficient in, and it's a problem that you're fixing now, long before your race. Staying with those supplements, vitamins and minerals that you're taking, any prescription medications, obviously. Race day supplements. Race day is not the time to decide, again, like I said earlier, that you want to try nitrates or glycerol or sodium bicarbonate or any of those. It's what you've worked on previously. And there are definite, caffeine is a performance enhancing supplement. Nitrates can be performance enhancing, but ideally these are not new supplements that you're taking or trying to add into the routine. And I see caffeine, they say 200 milligrams is kind of the standard performance enhancing benefit. But if you're, caffeine, some of us are caffeine receptor, some of us don't. It's a genetic component. So if caffeine affects you, then 200 to 300 milligrams could be good enough. If caffeine doesn't, you might need higher. If you're a regular caffeine consumer, you might see a different reaction to caffeine. And again, if you are getting caffeine from coffee, I think sometimes, a lot of the times people associate, they're like, oh, that's coffee. Caffeine and coffee are not necessarily synonymous. Coffee contains caffeine, but specifically caffeine is in your gels. Caffeine can be in tea. Caffeine can be in chocolate. A lot of bars now have caffeine added to them. So it's not just what you're getting from your coffee. All right. Your race day strategy, again, there's always,
real quick thing to add there on the caffeine question from Seeley. So the recommendation that we provide for sort of race day caffeine intake is on the bike, roughly 200 milligrams, sort of 90 to 120 minutes in. This is for a full Ironman. And then on the run, 200 milligrams, kind of, again, 90 to 120 minutes. But that's something, as Elizabeth said, you want to test. You don't want to do that the day of the race is your first time trying caffeine, and everybody metabolizes caffeine differently. And you likely want to start smaller, right? Don't go 200 right away, kind of ramp yourself up and see how your body reacts to it. But sort of, you'll see those guidelines when you have a race scheduled in your plan. Make sure it's marked as a event and that there's a duration as well as a estimated distance for that race, so we know how long that race is. And that recommendation will be built in. But the key there is like, make sure that's not the first time you're trying it. Or if you see it and, don't try it for that race, like save it for maybe the next race when you have had a chance to practice.
Great, thank you. And that is part of the race day strategy component. How are you going to use these supplements and your carbohydrates and hydration? How are you going to use those to enhance performance on race day? And as Jonathan touched, an hour, to 60 to 90 minutes in, where on the run are you going to incorporate it? If you incorporate it, if I always say you have to have a plan B, because triathlon is the sport where you're very, very lucky. It's kind of a miracle if everything goes according to plan in your race day. So what happens if you get off the bike and you're just feeling horrendous? Instead of waiting 90 minutes, should you take your caffeine, your first dose of caffeine earlier there? Or should you, if you get off the bike and you're feeling, nauseous, maybe you shouldn't give your body time to kind of rest and digest, give yourself a couple miles, your stomach to settle before you start fueling, even if your plan before was to have a gel in transition. So a backup plan based on weeks of testing in different scenarios and different situations is always recommended. So the strategy for if everything goes right, and then the strategy if something happens, if you drop a bar, if you're carrying chews with you, and you go through them faster. Have you looked at what fuel is going to be on the race course? Tried it at least. If you don't, even if it's not, the fuel that you choose to use, do you know how your body reacts to it? Because on race day, we may need to get food from those aid stations. Do you like flat Coke? Because I remember grabbing a, thing of Coke at one of the aid stations and just being wildly disappointed. It did not taste like, the Coca-Cola that I was expecting, and it tastes, so like understanding what things you might face on race day and the strategy that you have is really important. Same with your carbohydrate strategy. How much you have, how much you need. You can set a timer on your watch to remind you every 15 minutes to beep, so that you don't fall behind, because really that's, especially in a full Ironman distance, your goal is really to stay consistent and not fall behind on your fueling and hydration. And then, other considerations, what other things could potentially interfere with your fueling and hydration? Is it raining and you weren't expecting that? Is it the first time you've tried on your new race kit and the pockets aren't as big as your cycling kit was? That happened to me once. I'm like, this holds nothing. All of those outside things, like I said before, if you drop a bottle, if you need to rely on course nutrition, have you considered those and built a strategy for that?
Great. Well, we wanted to make sure to leave and open up time. So we have a good 20 minutes here for kind of Q&A. I'm going back to the last slide in case that helps spur any ideas of questions that you may have. So feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions. So who has practiced with caffeine or does take it for their race? Ada, would you be open to sharing like what you do and how it works for you?
Yeah, happy to share. Mine is really not very methodical. So I am, because of the years of racing that I've done 16, 17 full Ironmans. So before we didn't have all this, I've gone so much by how my body feels, and with every race, it's been so different, right? If it's hot, and I'm a more hot person racer. I do better than cold. I tend to need more calories when I'm cold. I tend to need more caffeine when I'm cold. So I go with how I've so tuned in. It's like the pace thing, not, using a Garmin for every pace that I have to hit. I've kind of internalized. I kind of go with how my body's feeling, how everything's going. even so much as how the saliva is in my mouth. So I kind of know when I'm over or when I'm under, but caffeine is a huge one. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, but honestly, on the run course for a full Ironman, I also do Red Bull. So I don't know if that is a good thing or not, but it works for
It
me.
works. It definitely
Yeah, it
works.
really works. So mine is I'll in my head for the race, depending on hot or cold, I wait for the caffeine till I am on the run.
Nice. Yeah.
I but I have it with me. I have it in gel form. It's easy for me to consume, and usually sugar is good with me.
Yeah.
So I take a pretty high dose of caffeine when I feel no, I need caffeine on the bike, especially if there's a climb coming.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I'll take it. So I'm not a good one to share with, like, because I'm not a clockwork, like I don't, but I do, as far as nutrition, I am constantly sipping on my Infinite throughout. So I just go with how I feel.
And I think that's really valuable. Our experience, because every athlete is so different, you've been doing it long enough to know what works for your body, and you're very in tune to knowing when you need caffeine or when you need calories, hydration. Like it's all. I don't think I would recommend someone's on their first Ironman to go by feel, because there's so many other components. But you're an excellent example of, I've had this experience, I know what works, I know. Do you metabolize caffeine at a 15 to 30 minute interval, or do you metabolize it at a 60-minute interval? And only through your body, how you feel. So I think you're a great example of it.
Yeah, but I almost feel like now, because everyone seems to know, oh, I have to consume, whatever, and if I don't do that, it's going to fall. I'm thinking, do I need to start knowing one of the reasons why I have joined Fuelin? Not so much to question what has been working for me, but can I optimize by knowing what it is that I need to do? So I'm learning all over again, I feel, right? Like when you asked, am I sweat testing? So I just got it done, my sweat test, when I was at the Kona camp. And I found out I'm basically a moderate sweater, like how salty my sweat is.
Yes.
Which I actually thought I was saltier, because some of the races I'm like covered in salt, like after a hard, like 4-hour hard ride, I've got salt on my face. So I thought I was a big salt sweater, but I guess I'm not. But knowing, then also weighing myself, I've never been one to weigh. I actually bought a scale when I joined Fuelin. So I'm so new to this stuff, because I've been just doing it on my own kind of thing. I'm trying to learn, because I really want to see if I can do better.
Absolutely. And I think that's where one of the big benefits of Fuelin really is optimization. It's different for every athlete, depending on kind of where you are in your sport journey. At 17 full Ironmans, it's very different than someone that's just trying to understand what foods to consume while they're riding their bike. And so in your case, taking that information, I'm a moderate sweater, and saying, okay, I can consume less sodium here. My gut will be feeling better. My body will be performing better. And then how do I fit that in with different carbohydrate options? What hydration product are you using?
Hydration pH.
Okay. Yeah. So better adjusting. That's a nice one to know. Do I need the 250, the 500, the the 1,000, and being able to tailor that as well on the bike and on the run.
Right.
So really finding those, like you said, optimal performance zones. And I think too, with Infinite, looking at increasing carbohydrate consumption while still maintaining performance will be really beneficial as well.
Yeah. So we have another question from Trish about caffeine, and then one from Celie. But Trish, do you want to unmute and ask your question? There you
Sorry,
go.
Jonathan, I'll tech challenge again, wrong button. So I've done plenty of Ironman. I'm not a super speedy athlete, but a few years ago when I was with another online team, they have, the ability to chat and share. They have like a Facebook group, and a lot of the athletes were using caffeine at around hour 4 or later on the bike, but not before that. So that's what I've always done. So an example, last fall, I had 2 Ironman and I used 200 milligram pill at around hour 4, and I'm between a 6.5 and 7 hour bike. And then I, do as best as I can on the run and, hit the Coke, and that's my caffeine fix on the run. So with this, seeing you want us to take it at 90 or 2 hours into the bike, is that based on a half or a full? And if I'm taking caffeine at hour 2 on a 6.5 to 7 hour bike, depending on what I'm doing, am I just taking 1 dose of caffeine, or am I dosing every 2 hours, or what's the scoop?
Great question. So when we're looking at race day, it really is performance focused, which is a different mindset from what you might need on kind of longer training rides. So if we're saying, what's the best strategy for you to perform at your best on race day? And the reason we look at starting at 2 hours in is because then ideally you're able to maintain speed and power that you've had for the first 2 hours well into the next. Now, the problem becomes there. Have you tested to know, sometimes higher doses of caffeine can increase GI upset or can increase headaches or whatever. So this is where it comes to, while we say 90 minutes to 2 hours, if that doesn't work for you because you're biking for 7 hours, then it's finding that interval of the optimal time to start and maintain performance, and then be able to still dose with additional caffeine as needed throughout. But the benefit there is maintaining power and speed and energy and the mental focus. I think with caffeine, it's underrated or often not discussed enough, of the alertness that goes along with caffeine consumption, and staying, at a 7 hour bike, being able to have that focus and reaction time, I think is very important. So where could we start? If you started at 2 hours, how would you feel at 4 hours? And this is where those longer, maybe 5 and 6 hour rides, practice rides, would be beneficial to see if you could have that caffeine earlier and how you feel.
And then, so you're saying not just 1 dose, start early and then maybe do a similar interval, whether that be 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, or whatever works that you find works in testing.
Yes, that you find works in testing. And again, this is specifically for race performance, not for everyday life optimization. Difference. I don't want everybody walking away think I want them, dosing with caffeine every few hours so you can get through the day. Performance oriented on race day.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Great.
Caffeine's one of those interesting supplements where, like, the more you take it, the less effective it is. And so, it's that balance, right, between when you use it appropriately to kind of give you that additional boost needed. So there's a question from Celie. Celie, do you want to unmute here and ask your question?
Sure. And I have to get off in 3 minutes, so I'll talk really fast. So I carry on the run, I carry the Endurance Top Gels, which you guys recommended, and I really, really like. They're so tasty. In my sports bra. And prior to those, I've always just done the blocks, which, are kind of hard to chew when you're running, but I haven't needed to carry as much because, it's kind of like 2 servings or 3 servings per packet. But carrying all those gels, I'm getting a lot of chafing in my chest area. And I mean, I'm like lathering on the Betwixt, but it's still a little painful when I get in the shower, as we can all, speaking like we all have experienced this.
That's the worst thing in the world, is that chafing sting. It can bring you,
Does anybody have any tips or tricks on how to prevent that besides just, oh, yes. Aida?
I wouldn't carry it there. I never have. That's where my ice goes. Hot races. So I usually wear my race shorts will have the little pockets on the sides. I stick them in there.
Yeah, mine don't. I mean, I have the pockets in the back, but those are just so not user friendly. I mean, I can put up with it, but I didn't know.
How about the pockets on the sides of your shorts?
I don't have any pockets on the sides of my shorts, on my tri-suit.
Yeah.
What if you were to tuck them in like the waistband? I don't know, maybe that would also cause chafing, but I don't know if you want it to be more accessible.
I have a one-piece speed suit.
Yeah.
How about your race belt with the notches that you can put them in there, right? They have those little loops on them. I've seen many people have those, and it's around your waist then, right there.
Yeah, I've thought about that. That's not what I have now, but I'm open to going that route for sure.
Does your race suit have the sports bra attached? Like, is it, okay, so I know Oiselle makes one.
Oh yeah.
It has the pocket, so it has the skin, like it doesn't sit on your skin.
Right.
So does Lululemon. I've got several of those.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
Pockets right there.
And I think Coair, the women, they make men's things too now, but they have started making a separate sports bra that has a pocket at the front.
Okay, I will check those out. Thank you.
And then you can always put, I mean, depending on how many you want to carry, your special needs bag can have them for like the second half, so you can potentially carry less. Or if again, the types of fueling, like it's not that, but let's say you needed 8 gels over the course of your run, maybe you have 4, and then you alternate between some of the ones on course, or do some like Coke or Red Bull or whatever, so you're carrying less, like finding that optimal. But the sports bra with the stash, and even some, I don't know if you wear a hat, but some of the like BOGO gear hats will have like a pocket in them to hold
okay,
one. Just make sure that it's the gel, not the chews, because pouring water on your head, and then you've got like soggy, gummy chew as opposed to gels, and it's just a mess.
Okay, thank you for the suggestions. I appreciate it.
This is see, ladies, we're all like, and gentlemen, we've
guys.
We've had this experience, and I know Betwixt is great, but so is Vaseline. Or like, I mean, I have rubbed that on whilst on my run shoes, and it's thick. It's ridiculous to get off, but it definitely helps.
Okay. And I see Danny's trying to. So Danny's, if folks don't know Danny, she's one of our pros that is part of Fuelin, and she says she uses a race belt for gel. So I don't know, Danny, if you're able to unmute and share more, but if not,
Yeah, I have a waist belt with the elastic loops and with a pocket. And for a half, that holds everything I need, but probably at max capacity, even for a half. So I think that I do have the Oiselle and Lululemon bras with pockets that I swear by for training. So I think that's a really good suggestion too.
Thanks, Danny.
Awesome. Thanks for chiming in, Danny. I think we have time for one more question. I know Francine, you had, why don't you chime in here and ask your question?
So I'm new to Fuelin. I love it. I'm still getting accustomed to entering everything. But I guess I'm not sure where to start. My first half Ironman is 3 months away, and I need to dig in and do like the sweat test, the carb test, the blood test. I really wanted to do a DEXA scan, and I was just wondering, which should I prioritize first as I'm kind of, getting used to the app and tracking my food. So just any suggestions would be helpful.
So first of all, race distance, you said a half in 3 months?
Yes, and I live in central New York in New York State, and it's the Muscle Man. It's on one of the Finger Lakes.
Oh, nice, great. Health history, this is the kind of questions that it's like, do you have issues, health history that you're concerned? Because in that case, I'd say let's do blood work first.
I'm pretty healthy. I've raced on and off for the last 10 years. I eat pretty clean. It's obvious through my tracking. I have to, even though I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, I have to decrease some of my carbs. But no, I really want to optimize my performance, but I don't have any health issues.
Yeah. So then I think priority number one is doing your sweat and carbohydrate testing.
Okay.
Because you're only 3 months away. And I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive as to doing your blood work at the same time. I mean, obviously cost is but carbon sweat tests, free. You just have to have your training opportunities. So I would say, look at your calendar, look at what your coach has prescribed, and like mark those days on the calendar for carbon sweat tests so that you're getting them in. And then scheduling your blood work, just making sure that it's not a day following a really hard session, because that'll skew some of the numbers. And then a DEXA scan, whilst incredibly important and useful, at the 3 month mark, like I think that could be something afterwards that, again, if you were telling me you were getting stress fractures or like body composition was a big issue, and which I don't think that it is. So it's like kind of, we can prioritize that a little later. But the blood work will help with, optimization in terms of if your vitamin D is low or your ferritin's low. 3 months still gives us enough time to implement some supplements that could help.
Okay.
Really good question. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.